Okay, so today's class, what we're going to be talking about is we're going to be talking about long layers. And I'm going to use a technique called the Radiate, which is part of my 7 systems of hair cutting. Now, with Elizabeth has naturally curly hair, so we want to get as much of this curl to work as we possibly can. So I'd like to just go through the consultation first and talk about how I would sell long layers to a client without using the word short, because I think, once we use the word short, we kind of box ourselves in. If I use the word short, the first thing that the client is going to actually ask me is, okay, Nicholas, well, how short are you going to cut my hair? So then, then I've boxed myself into a certain length, which I don't want to do. I want to leave everything so that I work within the balance points of the head to create the look and the volume that I want. So when I'm selling the haircut, what I like to do is first of all, I like to talk about giving the client really nice, soft volume on the top. So that what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to paint a picture for the client. So I'm going to give her soft volume on the top, and I want to leave the hair as long as possible. Clients love to hear the word long, so that would be appropriate. In the front, I was thinking of giving Elizabeth a fringe, but I want you to notice exactly how the hairline grows in the front. We have a natural part just off center, and if we look at the way that the hair grows, it really grows really steeply over to the right hand side and the left hand side. So if we give the client any kind of a fringe, okay, I mean, I can do that, but then I would have to smash it down with a blow dryer, and by the time Elizabeth gets to her car, it will have gone over like this. So I would not recommend having a fringe when the hairline is this pronounced. Looking at the shape of Elizabeth's face, her face is long, so I want to create a length here in the front that's actually going to soften the features. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my shortest point between the lip and the chin, and I'm going to blend this here so that it comes down and it joins up with the length that I'm going to take on the sides and the back. When I cut, the length that I'm going to take the sides of the back here, it's just going to be over the shoulder, and I'm going to come through and I'm going to keep it all one length, okay, and make it even all the way through to the other side. And then, like I said before, okay, this in the front is going to go from the chin all the way down, so that this comes around and it cuts to just underneath the chin on both sides, all right? So that would be how I would sell the haircut to the client without using that word short, so that we're painting a picture for the client and so that she understands exactly what the finished result is going to look like. So once she has agreed, okay, then we can go into the system of hair cutting. Whenever I want to find the parting, the natural parting in the hair, what I do is I comb the hair back and then just push the hair so that the natural part just splits by itself. And when I'm cutting hair, I always cut the hair for the way that the hair is growing. So where the parting is, it's really, really important, because if I was to just take like a center parting and then some of this hair would go over to the left-hand side, all right? And I cut it with a center parting. Then when the hair dries by itself, this side is not going to balance the way that the left-hand side is, because some of this hair is going to move over to the right-hand side. So cutting it for the natural part is very, very important. Now, the first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be cutting in our length. Because the way that I like to cut is I always like to have a guideline to go to. So the sections that I've completed here are the sections that I take when I'm going to do a one length. The first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a one length to cut in our outside shape, because I always like to have a guideline with my layering to go to, as opposed to trying to figure out my length after I've put the layers in. So we have the front side section over the ear, and then in the back I take the back section into 4 different sections. Okay, so we have the side back section, 2 sections in the middle of the back, and then another side back section here, and then the ear section, and then the side section. Now the reason why we have this many sections, okay, is because even though I'm doing long layers, when I'm doing a one length, I want to always stay with the rules that I have for doing a one length, because I have to make sure that when I comb the hair, I'm combing the hair following the way that the hair is growing, even though the hair is going to be layered underneath, because it just keeps me disciplined as far as the technique that I'm going to be using. I like to start over the shoulder, and the reason why I like to do it over the shoulder first is because then the client sees what I'm doing in the mirror. I think it's really, really important that the client follows through what we're doing, especially when we're cutting long hair, because, you know, she wants to keep it long. So starting here, she can see exactly the length that I'm cutting, and it just relaxes her, as opposed to not being able to see, you know, the length that I'm cutting. So I'm going to hold the hair between my fingers, because the hair is long. But each time I bring a section down, I want to make sure that I can see my guideline underneath. And I'm going to apply a lot of tension. The more tension I give the hair, the stronger the shape is going to be. And that applies on, you know, wavy hair, curly hair, straight hair. It doesn't make any difference what texture of hair I am going to be cutting. Tension is very, very important, because you want to have a solid shape, a strong shape. And come into the back section, the side back section, pick up the side section to act as my guide, okay? Making sure that I'm following the way that the root system is growing here, and bring that down and cut. And take the next section, following those roots, making sure I can see that guideline underneath, and applying a lot of tension. Now I'm on the right hand side, and what I want you to notice is that with Elizabeth, this shoulder here is slightly lower than her left hand shoulder. what I need to do is I need to take the hair, bring it down, and place it on the shoulder in roughly the same position on the shoulder here as I place the hair on the shoulder on the left hand side. Because if I measure and I make this hair here equal to this hair, then because of the way that Elizabeth is standing, it's not going to balance with her body. One side is going to be shorter than the other. So I think that's really, really important. And you know, that applies to cutting a client's hair long, or if you were going to go into like a bob that is above the shoulder, okay? The same thing would apply. I would have to cut the hair at the same point on the body for both sides to make it even. So I tend not to get into this area where you take the hair and you bring it down and you try to measure it so that it's the same length, because then I'm not cutting the hair for the client's body. So I'm bringing it down, cutting it to the same length over the shoulder as I did on the other side, with my parting here parallel to the line that I'm cutting into the hair. And then bring everything down to that line, following the way that the hair is growing. And I think, you know, these techniques are quite important, because it's just not a matter of just making the hair even on both sides, because our bodies are not even on both sides. I mean, you know, if we really look at the body, one side is slightly different to the other side. So I can't afford to get mechanical by just making everything even all the way through. So that will be my side section, and then I will go through with my back section here, blend it in. Okay, so now I finished my outside shape. Okay, so this is my line, which I mentioned, straight around, all the way around, just over the ear. So the technique that I used was exactly the same technique as I would use if I was going to do an A-line bob, or a straight around bob, or an Isadora line. It doesn't make any difference, because the system doesn't change. The only thing that changes is your outside shape. This is where you become creative. The system that you have to follow never changes. Now, we're into the into the front section. So what we want to do is we want to take a line from between the lips and the chin and blend that all the way through to my outside shape here. Okay, so the way that I put this line in here, okay, is to go back to my philosophy of following the way that the hair is growing. So I have to part the hair following the root system. I'm not going to do any over direction. There are a number of ways that you can blend this in, and the most common way is by taking this and over directing it forward and then blending it in. The thing that, you know, I find compromising about that particular system is that when you over direct, you could over direct it too far and then make it too long, or you could over direct it not far enough and then it comes back too short. So the idea behind the system that I'm going to use is to place the line exactly where you want it to fall in relation with the way that the hair is growing and the length first thing to do is to section the hair off following the roots. Comb the hair following the roots. Keep your fingers into the angle that you want the hair to fall into, okay? And keep the fingers as close to the client's head as you can, and then cut down. Okay, so now what we have is we have the length here, and then this bottom part of the section here is now going to be my guideline for my next section here. So I take the next section, comb it, fingers into the angle that you want the hair to fall into, and try to keep the fingers as close to the client's face as you can, because that's where we want the hair to fall, okay? So now I'm here, all right? And take the next section. Comb it, following the roots. Bring it down. Lots and lots and lots of tension. Again, the more tension you give the hair, the stronger that shape is going to be. Take the next section. See, there's no over direction there whatsoever. Bring it all the way down. And look, I'm very, very close to getting to my outside shape. And if I bring this down, I mean, look, we've only got that much to go. So it's just a matter of taking that and blending that in. To your outside shape, right there. There's one section there. Because then you see, you've got this line in here. And the great thing about doing it with this particular system is that you don't have to worry about whether or not this is going to get too thin in here. Okay, because you've cut the hair, or I've cut the hair right where right where I want that line to fall. Now, when I cut, I get a lot of questions on my scissors. You know, I use very, very small scissors, and the reason why I use small scissors is because I believe that the scissor should be an extension of your fingers. So when I'm doing this kind of work, okay, if I've got a long pair of scissors, it makes me that far removed from my cutting edge. So when I'm doing, you know, when I'm trying to be as precise as possible, I need to get the scissor as close to where, you know, my cutting edge is. So for me, the smaller the scissor, you know, the more precise I'm going to be. And when I cut, I'm always only cutting from the tip of my middle finger to the second crease of my middle finger. I don't cut all the way through to where my fingers join. Because if I cut from the tip of my middle finger to the second crease of my middle finger, I've got perfect tension. If I cut all the way through to here, okay, then there's a gap. And then there's no tension here, but there's tension here. And then I'm going to get an uneven section. The other thing that's really important, if you notice that I hold the scissors with my middle finger, I do not hold the scissors with my fourth finger, because if I hold the scissors with my fourth finger, then when I'm cutting against the skin, I have too many fingers underneath the scissor. And that makes me pick the hair up between my fingers, okay? So, you know, and the other thing is that, you know, if you look at your hand, the balance point of your hand is the middle finger. So it just makes sense to me that if I'm holding the scissors with my middle finger, then my scissor is perfectly balanced in my hand. And the thing that, you know, one has to remember is if you are using your fourth finger to hold the scissors, if you want to try and find out what it's like to hold the scissors with your middle finger, place the middle finger in the ring, and then the scissor has to be at an angle to your finger. It can't be straight up and down like that, because then you can feel the tension running in through here. So move the scissor over, and then you can cut like this, you can cut like this, or you can cut like this, and you can cut like this. And your scissor is perfectly balanced in your hand. The thing about cutting long hair is it's really, really easy to get lost. So this is the reason why with this particular system I have so many sections in the hair. And just a quick overview, because if you want to get more in depth, you know, we have the Radiate class on YouTube that you can go to. But just for a quick overview, just let me just say that each section that I have here does not connect with the previous section. So each section does not become a guideline for the next section. So it's completely disconnected all the way around, all right? Now, the thing that I think is really important is, you know, when we did the consultation, we did not show the client the length that we're actually going to take the top. We only painted a picture for the client by saying that we want to add volume to the top. So how do we get the right length? Okay, so what I do is I work within the client's two balance points, which are the crown and the occipital bone. So my length here on the top, when I measure to put the soft layering in, I'm going to measure from the top of the head to the occipital bone. It can't go any lower than that, because if it goes lower than that, then I lose the balance and the client looks like she needs to have a haircut. It looks like it's grown out. So the first thing that we do is we take this section here on the top and we measure it all the way down to the occipital bone, to there, and then lift it, and that is going to be the length that I'm going to cut the hair to. So this will now become my shortest point. Okay, so when that drops, it drops to just to the occipital bone. Now everything from that point is going to become longer. Lift it. And then I angle my fingers, okay, into a really steep angle, so that I'm cutting all the way down to my baseline. Okay, so that comes all the way down, so the length is still there. And then what I do is I place that back into its home, because remember, I'm not going to use that as my guideline for the next section. So take that and put it back. And then I'm going to do that all the way around using this section here as my guideline for the rest of the layering. Okay, so I have now completed the layering, and we can see, you know, how it's released the curl but kept the length. And with this in the front, I mean, look what happens. I can comb this back and just you know, it just goes into a really beautiful wave, just, I mean, completely by itself. So, you know, if Elizabeth doesn't do anything to her hair whatsoever, okay, this is what I like to mention to the client. If she doesn't do anything to her hair whatsoever, this is the worst it will ever look. Which is, you know, I love to say that to the client, because then usually the client goes, oh my God, this is the worst it will look? What's it going to look like when it's finished? So there is one thing that I would like to mention. When I did the sectioning, which I forgot to mention, when I get to this area here, right behind the ear, you know, when I'm doing all of these pie sections all the way through, I drop this section out. So this section here has not been cut. This does not blend with the hair that I've layered. And the reason why is because here there is no hair right in through here. So if we layer this all the way through, it's really easy to make it too thin at this area here. So remember, when you're sectioning, take that amount of hair, drop it out, and then don't blend with the layering, and then it leaves it thick and not wispy around the bottom. The technique itself is really simple, and because there's so many sections in the hair, you can't get lost. I mean, especially with the fact that we're not using each section as a guideline for the next section. That is really, really important, because what happens if we start using each section as a guideline for the next section, then, you know, by the time we get into the center of the head, we've got so much hair in our hands that we cannot see any guideline whatsoever. And the only guideline that we have, remember, is from this section right here on the top. So the fact that we're using the crown and the occipital bone as our balance points to create the length that we want on the top, again, prevents us from asking the client, how short do you want it? How short do you want the layers? I mean, if you go into a consultation using that word, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be able to do exactly what you want to do, because the client is going to stop and say, well, how short? How short? How short are you going to take it? How short are you going to take the top? And then we've boxed ourselves into a corner. Work within the parameters of the hair. Work with the texture. Work with the balance points. Work with the root system. And then automatically you will get the shape and the looks that you want, and the hair will just do what you want it to do by itself. So now I'm going to blow dry, and I'm going to blow dry with a diffuser, and I'm going to use our curl cream. It's called Curvaceous, okay? And we only need about that much, okay? Because it's very, very, very concentrated. And then what I do is emulsify it into my hands, so I've got really good distribution of the product, and then run it all the way through the hair. And the nice thing about the Curvaceous is that it just makes the curl individual. It gives the hair a little bit of body. But you see, again, you know, the nice thing about this technique, okay, is that you don't have that pyramid shape that happens sometimes, you know, when we layer hair. I mean, you know, the most common way really of layering it is to take this and over direct everything into the center, and then it comes down, and then we've got all of this masses of hair around the bottom, and then we feel like we have to go in and then chip everything out to take the weight out. Whereas with this particular system, okay, it hugs it hugs the head, so you don't have that pyramid shape to it. And you know, I'm going to use a diffuser, but you know, for Elizabeth, all she has to do is go in here with her fingers and release that curl, and it'll just dry the way that it's supposed to. And she's got a beautiful, beautiful curl. I mean, it's just terrific. And by, you know, putting the layers in it, we're just releasing all of that fantastic texture. Quick overview on what we have just accomplished. After you've shampooed, well, after you've done the consultation, shampoo, and to look for the natural parting, remember to comb the hair straight back, push very slightly from the back of the head, and let the natural parting take over. So once we've got the natural parting in, comb the hair down, part the hair so that you, as if you were going to do a one-length ball, because the outside shape is going to be, or is, all one length, okay? Then take a square section on the top, and from that square section on the top, pie out as many sections as you can, depending on the thickness of the hair. So the finer the hair is, you don't need as many sections. The thicker the hair is, the more sections that you need, because otherwise you're going to get lost in the haircut. Remember to, remember to get the length. You take the square section on the top, you bring it down, and you're either going to, depending on your consultation, you're either going to measure it to the crown or to the occipital bone. Usually, 9 times out of 10, when I'm layering long hair, the client wants soft volume on the top. So I usually take it from the top of the head to the occipital bone. Then, using that as your guideline, I start over the ear. It's completely up to you as to whether or not you start back. It doesn't make any difference. I like to start over the ear. I do the ear section first, okay? And depending on how long your hair is, that will determine the angle of your fingers that you take to actually cut the hair, using square section on the top as your guideline. Remember, when you put the pie sections in, this section here right behind the ear, you drop out a section so that it retains the volume that you need at this area of the head. Remember, do not use each section as a guideline for your next section. Each pie section is individually cut. That way, you never get lost, okay? And it just makes cutting the hair that much easier. And then afterwards we blew dry with the curvaceous, and now we're ready to see the finished look.